Okay, so the idea of today is to look at what a personalized employee experience looks like and really to talk you through one of the features that we've done at Beezy in collaboration with a few of our customers. So we try to understand the kind of challenges our customers face when they're looking to create that personalized experience and really what that means, looking at things like culture, identity, belonging, all the things that I think most organizations now are very cognizant of the fact that they need to deliver for their employees. Okay, so firstly, a brief introduction to myself. My name is David Fletcher. I've spoken on a few of these things, so some of you may have seen me before, but my official title is Director of Enterprise Sales, but I've kind of done everything for Beezy over the years. Worked with customers on the customer success side, the project side, and I've been in this space building intranets within SharePoint since 2008. So kind of know the space relatively well, and I know the Microsoft technology very, very well. And of course, the main thing that I care about is making sure that users understand our product and are comfortable and happy with the way that it all kind of ties together. And with that in mind, I'll try and walk you through not only the product feature that I'm talking about today, but really why it's relevant and why customers need to make targeted content, make sure that content is personal to those users, and some of the challenges and stories that I've heard from other customers in regards to this particular use case. So the first thing is, of course, the feature itself. It's not really a feature. It's an amalgamation of features that tie all of our different product features together. But I hate doing the whole feature demos because realistically, a feature is only relevant or useful if a customer uses it or it has any kind of, like I say, relevance to them. So instead, we're going to talk about some of the challenges that customers face and why our product has adapted in a way to try and meet those needs. So of course, global local is a challenging problem. And if anything, it was amplified by COVID. Most organizations we deal with are enterprise. They're very, very large and they tend to have dispersed workforces across the globe. Now, in some cases, they're just in North America or just in the UK, but most of our customers are global and even more challenging. Most of our customers are very, very large. Our average customer size is, I think it's around 50,000 employees. So in an organization of that size, it's very difficult to keep one holistic intranet or digital workplace, but then at the same time, make sure that the insular pockets and cultural identity of the different countries or departments or even sub-companies remain. And it is a challenging problem and something that's not easily solved. So as I mentioned, the problem is this. Most organizations we speak to want one intranet. But the reality is that 9 times out of 10 in a big global organization, we're replacing a plethora of local intranets. I think the record is 56. 56 localized intranets that every country, or in some cases, company or department had prior to looking at Beezy as a product. And what we sort of tried to do over the years is it's been a phased approach. We started off really looking at how, well, what does a global intranet want and what does it mean? And we wanted to start by making sure that the newsfeed, which is like the kind of Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn of our product, it's the amalgamation of your world in a single timeline. We wanted to make sure that was personal. We did that in 2012. I mean, this has been going for quite a while. And then we needed to evolve that. And really that came around the idea of employee communications and the editorialized content needed to be targeted. Again, makes perfect sense. So we started to make sure that our administrators who are creating content could really target the news. And again, that was good, but it wasn't really good enough. There were still holes and gaps when you're looking at personalization. And one of the holes and the gaps was HR, the ability for these policies and procedures to exist across the whole organization. But as we all know, different countries and in some cases different companies that sit under one umbrella have different policies and procedures. So again, we needed to make sure that that dissemination of content, holiday booking form, paternity, maternity, and I always use this as an example, and I apologize because I know most of the audience is North American, but this is a real life situation where a customer basically found, it was a North American lady, found her maternity leave in the intranet and got very excited until she realized that she'd actually stumbled across the Swedish maternity leave. Now, North America and Sweden have very, very different approaches to maternity, paternity. These kind of annual government-backed leaves tend to be very different in different countries. And it can cause frustration, unhappiness. So it's very, very important that you see the policies and procedures that are relevant to your role, your job, your location. And of course, that was something we also made sure that we improved in the product. Again, good, but still not really good enough. And I'll explain why in a moment. So this problem, global intranet versus local intranet, is one that is not easily solved. So instead of looking at it purely from a content perspective, which is what we'd always done, we decided to look at it from a slightly different angle. And the angle we looked at instead was, well, how do we allow these, and the best way to explain this is culture, but how do we allow these pockets of culture, this identity, this sense of belonging to remain in a large organization? And I'm just going to kind of take a step back here and give you, again, another example. So I was on holiday the week before last, and I took my family to Cyprus. I've not taken my kids away yet. One is 2 and one is 5 months old, just turned 5 months old. And we haven't flown with them yet. It's the first time we've flown. And it was a great experience. Well, not a great experience, but it was an experience. But when we got there, we were playing around the pool with the kids, and there was other children there, and most of the parents came up to me and started asking questions about the kids. And when you get chatting to parents, the first question that everybody seems to ask is, oh, what do you do for a living? And the reason I'm telling you all this is that, of course, your response is always twofold. It's A, your job, and B, your company. And we put a lot of stock in the company we work for. You know, I've met people who are ashamed of the company they work for because of the bad press they receive, or the perceptions that people have based on them for the organization they work for. Similarly, I've met people who are very proud of the company that they work for. And I think now more than ever, this is something that companies are trying to foster. They're trying to make sure that their identity as an organization is one that is clear, but also making sure that you as an individual know the cultural kind of standpoint and identity of your organization. And that's great and very easy to do if you're only 20 employees. A mom and pop that only has 20 people has very clear set of ideals, very clear set of values that they try to push to everybody. And that's really easily communicated across 20 users. But if you've got an organization of 250,000 employees, which we do have as customers, then having that name, that brand, that identity, but also keeping pockets of culture is challenging. So instead of giving it purely from a user perspective, what we decided to do is look at how we deal with this from a more of an administrative perspective. So what that means is, instead of having one administration portal in our product, and our product is a product, it's ready built. So when you log into Beezy or you install it for the first time, you've got this administrative dashboard which allows you to control everything in the product. And it requires no technical knowledge whatsoever. Anybody can do it. You just need the administration rights. It looks a little bit WordPressy, but it's all SharePoint. But the reality is that it's very easy for a global admin to start to target and disseminate content, but only at a global level. So what we did is we said, let's look at a local admin as well. Let's look at introducing a whole new admin panel, which will allow for what we call a sub-entity. So we're allowing an intranet to have almost like a localized entity, which can be partially managed by a local admin. And again, there's a term that I kind of cringe when I say, but we've been saying it for I don't know, 15, 20 years now. Replicate the water cooler, right? We hear this a lot during COVID. Replicate the water cooler. How do we keep those small team cultural feels of identity and belonging? And really, that's why we came up with the idea of doing this at an administrative level. So in our product, there are a few features. I'm not going to go through the features today. Of course, we don't have that much time to go through them all. But at a very high level, every intranet has a hero or a carousel. And I call this the push. It's the idea that more and more we're becoming aware of the value of homepages. I have a very strong opinion on the weather widget. I think it's the most pointless app in the history of any apps or widgets. Of course, it's a gimmick. Every time you get the iOS 15 update the other day, or you get an Android phone or whatever it is, people play with the weather widget. And it's great, but realistically, we've all got windows. We can all look outside. But this idea of the homepage and the real estate being super important is starting to get a lot more traction in the digital workplace world. Things like single page application, keeping your users on one page is very important. And of course, we want to make sure that when you're using our product, the carousel, or as we call it, the hero, can be targeted to those localized areas of the business. The navigation's obvious. If you log in North America, you'll have different navigation from the UK. If you log in from company X, which is owned by company Y, you'll again have different navigation. News, again, very obvious. Every internal comms team I've ever met wants the ability to push news. And whether that's at a global level or at a local level, it's important. So, and again, in our hero, the ability to have global news stories overriding certain parts and having localized news stories visible in other parts is very, very important. Pages for us is policies and procedures. So again, I mentioned the HR policies, the maternity leave, the paternity leave. This is a common use case, and making sure that that is respecting the global local feature is also very important. Moving forward, and this is a new development that we're working on at the moment that is, well, just seen the first iteration, the ability to have Discover cards at a localized level. Discover cards in our product are like advertising. They're obviously not advertising, but they're the idea of serendipity. They're trying to improve your experience as a user by recommending relevant content. And again, if you're doing that at a global level, how serendipitous can those recommendations be? How relevant can they be? They can't, particularly in an organization of 200, 300,000 employees. So making sure that, again, these Discover cards are at a global and local level is really, really important. And lastly, for about 5 years, we've had audiences in our product, and audiences allow you to target content based on who somebody is. So via Active Directory, via a sync with your HR system. So I know everybody who works in sales in the UK will see this content. And again, that's really, really useful at a global level. But if you then disseminate that further into the localized areas of your intranet, you can be uber specific with the content targeting. We're talking targeting to the nth degree. I actually had a conversation about this week. I don't think there's anything you can't target inside of our product. We had a use case where the customer actually had an AD group within an entity that allowed them to target based on where someone was sat in the office. So it really can be that granular. But the reality is, everything we do inside of Beezy is about simplicity of UX and UI. So, okay, what does that mean? And how do we give this complex problem, this hugely complex problem, how do we give it a simple answer for you guys, for the content authors, the administrators? And I'm going to walk you through the user journey of what a global admin and a local admin will do in our product today. So this is Mark. Mark is the global admin. And for all intensive purposes, most of you watching this video are Mark. So most of you watching this recording or this event are going to be Mark, because you're going to be the global admins, right? You're going to be the ones that are responsible for the intranet, for the digital workplace. So in those instances, think of yourself as Mark. The idea is that this is our admin panel, but instead now you've got a new option. And the new option is local entities. And what you do as the global admin, as Mark, is you create them. So you go in and you say, I want a local entity called Brazil, Argentina, etc., etc. So you could do countries. But also, more importantly, we have a number of, for example, global banks. One of our global banks owns, I think, 6 other organizations. Some of them are banks, some of them are insurance, but they actually all sit under one tenant. They sit under one Microsoft Office 365 subscription, and they sit under one reportership. Now, if you go and work for Bank X, you probably don't even know that Bank Y is your overlord. You probably don't even know this, but the reality is that's the case. Now, the reason that this bank bought the other bank is they wanted to bring them in. They wanted to bring them into the fold, but keep their identity, keep what they do. So if your branding is green and blue with pretty red accents, and the other bank is yellow and black with pretty pink accents, then the two looks and feels of these banks is completely different. Similarly, we have an agricultural firm that has, I think, 50 companies that they own, but they all sit under one banner overall as a kind of conglomerate, and they sit inside of one 365 tenant. So a local entity doesn't have to be country specific. It could be company specific. It could even be departmental. And another really nice use case that only really came to my mind while we were speaking to a couple of the analysts in the last few months. We've been having some sessions with Forrester and Gartner, and there's a few reports going on. And one of the things that we're getting asked a lot about at the moment is frontline workers. And we've actually got a couple of customers that are starting to use our entities for frontline workers. Why? Why are they doing that? Well, frontline workers have their own set of challenges, their own set of needs for targeted content. So actually creating an entity just for those frontline workers is incredibly useful, and you'll see why. The idea is that as a global admin, you of course set the name of the entity, pretty obvious. And this sounds really basic, but it's actually not. You set the default language. Well, okay, that's obvious, but why is that a big thing? Why am I pausing and making a deal out of this? Well, we are a product that sits inside of SharePoint, right? We're a product that sits completely natively inside of the customer's Microsoft Office 365 tenant or the Microsoft 365 tenant. And in native SharePoint, you can't have multiple base languages. You can have multiple languages. You can have any language that SharePoint supports. There's a long, long list of languages that they support, but ultimately SharePoint always has to have one base language. And that means that content has to be created in that base language before it can then be created in other languages. Let me give you a very real example. Try telling a French bank that they have to write in English before they can write in French. It does not go down well, and I know this from experience. So one of the really good things about our localized entities is you can say, guys, don't worry. You don't have to ever write English, or you don't have to write Spanish, or you don't have to write French. You can just write the language that is relevant to that entity. Solves a huge amount of headaches and saves a lot of time having to create multiple versions of content, navigation, and of course, stories. Next, the different modules or features that I mentioned at the start, there was kind of a list and I walked you through stories and pages. And again, you're not going to fully contextualize this until you've seen a proper product demo of Beezy, but at a high level, it's relatively easy to understand. Now, by default, automatically, we will turn these localized entities on. Again, why? Why does this matter? Why is this relevant? Well, because again, that whole replicate the water cooler, right? Those small pockets of culture and identity and belonging are very, very important. So keeping them is very, very important as well. Therefore, when we enable a new entity, by default, it will select all of the localization by default. The global admin may decide otherwise. The global admin may decide, you know what? We don't have separate sets of policies. We're a North American organization. We don't have multiple countries. Everybody has the same holiday booking form, the same sick leave. So we turn pages off and we just have one set of policies that is ubiquitous across the whole organization. But in a department level or even in a company level, they can still target the news, the navigation, etc., etc. What that means is the global admin can then granularly go into each of these modules and really lock down certain parts. So of course, admin's a good example. I've never met a customer that wants every single part of the navigation to be localized. Doesn't happen. There's always parts of the navigation that you will want to be global. So for example, maybe you have a section called Our Company, right? And Our Company should be ubiquitous across the whole organization. You should click on it no matter whether you work for company X, company Y, company Z, and see what the kind of hierarchy of your organization is. It makes sense. So as an admin, you can go in and you can actually lock down parts of the global admin and really define and lock it to say, hey, local admins, you can change block 2, 3, 4, but you can't change block 1. And underneath that, there's lots of, it's a mega menu. So all the different sub-menus as well, you can lock or make available. Then, and I think there's a couple more to add to this coming up in the next release. In fact, I think there's one more than there already is now today. But the idea is that we predefine layouts of the hero. We do this again for a number of reasons. I explained at the start about single page application and how this is becoming more relevant, and intranets and digital workplace professionals are starting to understand the value of focusing the homepage and making sure there's no wasted real estate. So we define the hero or the carousel for you, but we're not inflexible. There are a lot of options within these layouts, and of course, a lot of granularity. One of the things that is there for that granularity is for the admin, in this case, the global admin, to define which parts of the navigation he locks down or she locks down. So for example, global stories we're going to lock, but everything else we're going to make available for the local admin. Or global stories we're going to lock, and this little web part down here, we're also going to lock because we're going to just plonk the CEO Teams live event in there, and we want everybody across the whole organization to see it. Juliana, who's then the local admin, will get access. Juliana will get a little notification inside of Beezy saying, hey, congratulations, you now have access to go and set up that local admin. Okay, so of course, then what happens is that the global admin has locked parts of that navigation, and you can see here that Juliana can't change these top two blocks. In this case, we actually have one section called corporate and one section called local apps. So she can't change these. Then when she goes into the hero, you'll see that again, the global stories is locked. But in this instance, we've actually been quite nice and we've said, you know what, Juliana, the rest of it, you can do what you like with. You can have, if you want that fabled weather widget, you can have it. If you want the cafeteria menu, whatever your heart desires, you can put in these little widgets here, and they will be localized to your country or to your entity. Of course, we, the global admins, are still having a little bit of control because we're locking down the global stories. The next part is, well, what does it look like from an employee perspective? We've locked down certain parts of the product. We've made some of it, again, I keep using the term ubiquitous, but available across the whole organization. So what does that mean to the user? Well, it can kind of mean two things. So firstly, in some organizations, they have the same exact look and feel. And this is the example where, for example, you'll have entities per country or entities per department. And there, an employee in the UK and an employee in the United States will feel like they've got the exact same intranet, the same content, the same newsfeed, the same everything. But the reality is, of course, they haven't. Now, Beezy by its very nature, as I mentioned, is already completely targeted. But having that local entity will mean that some of this navigation is actually defined based on who I am. So you can see there's only a few little subtle changes here. In the UK, we call it employees, and in the United States, we call it people. In the UK, we call it apps. In the US, we call it tools. And again, those tools may be slightly different, and the employee area might be slightly different, but it's quite subtle. It's more, again, cultural as opposed to transformational differences. And then, of course, the local news is different as well, because I see the news that is relevant to me in the UK, whereas my colleague in North America will see the news that's relevant to them. The global news is the same. Now, the layout slightly different, but the global news, as I say, is across the whole organization. And in this instance here, what we've decided to do is to keep the web parts completely local. So these other options that you have in the carousel or in the hero, we're keeping local. So these are only seen by UK employees, and these ones are seen by US employees. Again, it might be a mix. Some customers might say, well, no, we're going to have those little web parts global for the whole organization, or maybe this one is locked and the rest are local. The newsfeed is always local. There's nothing you can do about the newsfeed because it's basically like Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, in that it only shows you content that is relevant to your role. So it doesn't really respect global local, it just respects who you are, in much the same way of Facebook. You know, if you go to Spain on holiday, or you go to Mexico on holiday and you log into Facebook, it's in Spanish, but it's still your newsfeed. It doesn't change. It's still your personal newsfeed. And of course, Beezy is the same. Whether you work in the UK or the United States, your navigation, your editorialized content, your policies, your procedures might change, but your newsfeed is still your newsfeed. It's still personal to your everyday working life, the communities you work in, the different products you use, the tasks you've been assigned. It's an amalgamation of your world in a single newsfeed, timeline, or whatever parlance you decide to use. It's an aggregation of your world. Of course, there are other companies that don't have the same look and feel. You know, it's not a real example, but it's a very real example in that we've got a couple of customers that we do a lot of case studies with. One of them, I think, Glencore did a case study with you guys recently, and we've got a global bank we're hopefully going to do something with on stage in the coming months, where they've got multiple entities that are branded. So in some organizations, as I say, they might have this pink branding for a bank, and there's another bank that they own that is more of a turquoisey green, or minty green maybe, branding. Now, of course, again, just like the other screenshot that I showed you, some of the content will be global. So some of the content may be global news, and although these are the same news blocks, there's actually different news on the carousel that's scrolling through, but it is the same news. Interestingly enough, although not in this screenshot, if this was the UK or if this was Spain and the United States, the global news would still be global news. It's just that I would see it in Spain in Spanish, and my colleague in the United States would see it in English. Again, the newsfeed is still your personal newsfeed, and the navigation still has some subtle differences, but it's still one Office 365 tenant. It's still one intranet, but it has the ability to remain in that culture and identity. And I can't do a presentation without referring to sports in some way, shape, or form. So I use the example of, I'm a Liverpool Football Club fan, which is soccer for those of you in North America. And I've watched my team in lots of different countries. I took 3 years off work, 3 years away from SharePoint to travel the world on a motorcycle. And in that time, I watched Liverpool games in South America, in Brazil, in Argentina. I watched them in Asia. And I can tell you that no matter where you watch the game, there are some things that remain the same. One of which is, of course, the amount of Liverpool shirts that you see. And there are some that are completely different. For example, in Australia, the drinks, the food they have at halftime that they bring around the bars is completely different from that of Asia. And the scarves are very different in Chicago than they are, for example, in Buenos Aires. But again, the idea is that there's one thing that keeps all of these fans together on a global basis. They all support the same football club. But there are completely individual cultural things that make up watching the game a very different experience. And of course, intranets and companies that are global have these same set of challenges. How do we as a global organization make it very, very easy to have content that is available to everybody, make everybody feel like they're part of the larger organization, but at the same time respect culture, respect identity, respect belonging? And it's a challenging thing to get right, but hopefully with our product, we can help those customers to achieve that. Now, this product in isolation, or this feature in isolation, is not good enough. Of course, it's a great set of features. It's a great set of configuration options for a customer. But we, as an organization, have a customer success program that will help our customers on this journey. The global bank I keep mentioning, who I can't mention for NDA purposes, we went through so many different iterations with them as a customer success team to define what their localized entities look like. Was it per company? Was it per country? Was it, to the nth degree we went through this. We even, in that exact project, they decided to create the AD groups based on the entities we were creating. So it was nice for internal comms to define the AD groups for a change instead of IT saying, hey, these are AD groups, go and work with it. But we are with you on this journey. So we help those customers set that balance. Some entities might only have one person writing news. So let's keep it more global. Let's lighten the workload on that entity, on that local admin. And some, of course, may want to be more local, right? So again, we will manage this kind of decision with you. Is it more global? Is it more local? Are you a large organization? Are you a small organization? Do you have some small entities that need your help more? Or do you have very, very big entities, each one almost like its own company that needs more localization? In short, it's a product feature that we're very proud of, but also does not, as I say, come in isolation. It requires a conversation. It requires more depth and detail, and for us to really sit down with the customer to understand the relevance for them. Thanks for the time of watching this today. And of course, if you want to see more on global local or any of the features that Beezy has as a product, as mentioned, we are a product. So everything I've shown you is out of the box. You can install it inside of 2 hours and then work with our customer success team to make it successful for your organization. Thank you for your time.